The officers of the East India Company, the Governor General himself, Warren Hastings, and then the founder of Asiatic Society of Bengal, Sir William Jones, and other people, they started. Hello dear friends, today we will discuss about how did the British control us. Do you know it is very easy to win over a state, it is easy to win our military power, but it is very tough to win the heart of the people. I mean to say that suppose you can defeat a king, but you cannot defeat the people. We can take one example. Suppose when the Britishers started coming to India and they had defeated Bengal Nawab in the Battle of Plassey in 1757. After that they had defeated Bengal, Awadh and Mughal Badshah, especially in the Battle of Buxar in 1764, and then in 1765 they had signed a Treaty of Allahabad in which the Britishers were granted Diwani rights to collect revenues from Bihar, Bengal and Orissa. But you know why the British government had to get this right? They had taken this right from the Mughal Badshah so that they can tell the people that we have the Farmani right and now we have the power taken from the Mughal Badshah to collect revenues from these states. Alright. Gradually they had defeated Mysore in 1799, then they had defeated Maratha in series of battles, they had defeated Sikh Empire, and the smallest empires were also integrated into the British domain. But do you know, they were in India, but they had many problems in India, and I have identified basically 4 problems that they were facing just after the establishment of British rule in India. So we will discuss these 4 problems and then we will look into the solutions taken by the British government in India. Alright. One of the first problem they were facing is that how to govern this far-flung dependence in India. India was a vast country, so it was very tough for them to govern these areas. Okay. The second problem was that how will this justify to their own people? To their own people means in India, in the beginning, initially, the East India Company was ruling. It was not the British government. So they had to justify to British people in Britain. They had to justify these things to British Parliament also. Alright. So the second problem was this one. The third problem was that suppose if they had defeated Mysore, let's say, they had defeated Mysore, but how will this governance be secured for long time? So this was the problem, that they have to maintenance this defeat over any empire. So they had to secure their empire in India. All right. The other point is that on what principles they may get legitimacy. Suppose if they are ruling in India, so their rules should be legitimized by the British people, by the world. So this was important point for them. Okay. So they had 4 problems in the 18th, 19th century, and now they had brought 4 different solutions of this problem. And what is these different solutions? Firstly, solution was Orientalism. The second was the idea of utilitarianism, Evangelicalism, and the question of race. We will understand these 4 concepts brought by the British government over a period of time in 18th and the 19th century, and then we will see how these people were controlling us basically. Alright. So let us go into the first theme, that is Orientalism. Do you know the Orientalism? It started in the mid 18th century, and the meaning of Orientalism is the study of the East. Study of the East. So basically in the beginning, the officers of the East India Company, the Governor General himself, Warren Hastings, and then the founder of Asiatic Society of Bengal, Sir William Jones, and other people, they started reading about India. So they read about India to know us, to rule us. Alright. So in the beginning, initially, through this idea of Orientalism, first of all, after studying our sources, they had reconstructed our past. And in the construction of our past, they had their own construction, that what should be the colonial construction of India's past. And in this construction, James Mill was such person. He had written a book called History of India, which was published in 1818. James Mill basically had divided India into three parts: ancient, medieval and modern. He said ancient India was ruled by Hindus, medieval India by Muslims, and modern India should be ruled by the British world. Do you know, he said the Indians, the ancient Indian rulers had a lack of rationality. Matlab Indian ruler had no rationality. There was a lack of political consciousness, and there is a lack of individualism also. Okay, he said the Indian society was stagnant, it was not moving, and there was no economical or social development in India. Thomas Macaulay, he also said the Indian rulers were despotic, they were unrepresentative. Unrepresentative means the Indian rulers, alright, the Indian kings were not ruling India for the people, they were ruling India for their own purpose, for land grants, land revenues and all. So these were the important things we will discuss in detail in a series of lectures. Their other point was that there is a person, historian called Alexander Daw. He had written a book called The History of Hindustan, in which he argues that where people have long been subjected to arbitrary power, their return to liberty is arduous and almost impossible. He said, as India's rulers, the British sought to create public virtues in their subjects, and then they had accepted the responsibility of the citizen of India. Alright. So this was one important point. Then they had also divided India into different terms. They say that India had no capitalist system, especially the Indians were backward, it was just religion and politics, there was a political hierarchy. The Max Weber said there was a caste factor and there was a lack of rationality in India. One of the important points is that when Warren Hastings started ruling as a Governor General of Bengal, you know, he had adopted three different policies. One of the first policy was that he said he didn't want to have common law in India. Common law means a law for everyone, Britishers, Hindus and Muslims. He said India should have Indian law. Indian law means laws for Hindu differently, laws for Muslims differently, and the laws for Britishers differently. He said the law in India should be based on religious identities. Religious means Quran, Dharma Shastra, Manu and all. He also said that he will not accept local customs and tradition in making laws, but he will depend on the religious texts written on that topic. Okay, so these were some of the important points for him. And then through this idea of Orientalism, they started studying India, they started writing about India, and then they started blaming about India. Do you know, he said, especially the Britishers and Max Weber, we have Max Muller, we have John Stuart Mill and all. There were many Orientalists and liberal philosophers from Britain. They were claiming that India in ancient time was barbarous. They said India had no sense of history. They had humiliated India's past. So this was one such idea, Orientalism. Through this construction, they started studying about India, reading about India, writing about India, and then telling the Indians that you had no rich ancient Indian culture. Okay. Now there was a second idea through which they started ruling us. They started controlling us. And what is the second idea? The second idea is the idea of liberalism. Okay, and this idea of liberalism was based on the idea of utilitarianism. Liberalism means, the simple meaning of liberalism, that if any government, suppose if any government will rule on the basis of utilitarian idea or the liberal idea, their main purpose, the main purpose of the government should be happiness. Alright. So main purpose of the government should be happiness, and especially James Mill brought a concept that India should have a code of law which will release individual energy by protecting the products of its efforts. Okay, he had focused on this idea, and they said that, let's say, they said in the 1790s that India had many corruptions. The people were very corrupt in India. That is why they brought Indian civil service in 1793-94. They introduced permanent settlement in India from Bengal in 1793. So there was many such reforms were brought in India, civil services and all. Okay, they had made reforms in Indian police system, Indian post system, law system. They had brought many changes in the religious sphere. They had made many changes in education system in India after 1833. They had introduced in English in India. So through these methods, they were telling that they wanted to provide the people the idea of individualism. They say that they are ruling India as a responsible ruler. So they were telling through this idea of utilitarian and all. Okay, so this was one such point. Through this, they said that we are ruling you for your own betterment purpose. All right. Third important point for them is the idea of evangelicalism. This idea especially focus on the good news of salvation brought by the Christ. Okay, they had started a crusade against Indian barbarism. The Hindu religion was barbarism, the based on barbarism, and especially they said, and Charles Grant was one such chief converter in India. Especially if you talk about through this method, especially after the Charter Act of 1813, the Christian missionaries were allowed into India, and now they started coming in India. They started telling the people that how Hindus and the Muslims are not working for their people, how the societies of these religions are divided into many parts. So through these methods, they started claiming that Christianity was the best religion in the world, and the conversion process started. Through this, they started humiliating people in India and telling that their religion is the best religion. Okay, so this was one concept through which we can understand that they were telling Indians that these Britishers were good. Okay, so this is the third point through which they were controlling us properly. The fourth important point is the idea of race, the question of race. Do you know, through question of race, I have taken two important points in this question of race. One point is the creation of differences. All right, creation of differences is one point. If you see this word, creation of differences, and I have taken Thomas Metcalfe ideologies of the rights to understand this topic. The first point in the question of race is the creation of differences. The second point is the Aryan debate. Okay, in case of question of differences, do you know, they had humiliated us a lot. They said that we, the Indians, were very much inferior. We were in the past. Okay, we are very much different from the Britishers. Okay, what they said, especially if you talk, they try to prove that 18th century India, okay, whatever was happening in the 18th century India, society, politics, economy, culture, trade and all, whatever was happening in the 18th century India, they said that the 18th century of India is compared as a 13th, 14th, 15th century of medieval Europe. Okay, so 18th century of India can be compared with 13th, 14th and 15th century of Europe. Do you know what was happening in these periods of Europe? There was no state formation, there was no market system, there was a feudalism, and it was a transition phase. The 15th century was a 12th to 15th century was a transition phase of feudalism, from feudalism to capitalism. Okay, there was no powerful state at the time. Trade was not happening. Society was barbarous. Okay, all right. So they had compared the 18th century India, which they claim as a modern period, as the 13th, 14th, 15th century medieval Europe. It was one such point that we were very much backward as compared to the Britishers. The other point is that, do you know, there is a historian called George Campbell. He had written and he compared the 18th century Sikh Empire, the Sikh Empire led by very famous King Raja Ranjit Singh. All right. So 18th century Sikh Empire of Raja Ranjit Singh was compared as a medieval state in Germany. मतलब whatever was happening in the medieval Germany, in the 14th 15th century Germany is compared with Ranjit Singh. मतलब they said that we are still in the medieval times. So through this way they try to prove that we are very much inferior as compared to the Britishers. Okay. The second point is that the Aryan debate. All right, we will discuss this debate very slowly. They try to prove that all are Aryans. All means the British and Indians are Aryans. There were two sets of Aryan from Central Asia. This is Central Asia. So one set of Aryan migrated to Europe and Britain. The other sets of Aryan migrated to Asia and India. Okay. The people who migrated to this side, they were very much active. The people who migrated to this side, they were very much passive. Alright, active, passive. Then you know what was happening? They had political consciousness. They had sense of time. But these people were, they were scientific. Alright, and then these people were very much religious, philosophical. Alright, I have made another video on Aryan debate which will be shared with you soon. Alright, but the point is that through this method of Aryan debate, they try to tell that the Indian peoples who are also Aryans, but they are very different. They are passive, they are made for ruled, they are religious, they are philosophical, they have no scientific sense, they had no sense of time, they had not written history, they are not politically active, they are not representative. All right. So through these four methods, they have been claiming that the Indians should be ruled by the British, and then they had forwarded theory that was white man's burden, that it is the burden on the British part. It is their duty to civilize the uncivilized people, and through these methods they had been telling that we are here for your betterment purpose, and this is the method. Through this they try to control us. They, over a period of time, they fooled us. Alright guys, we have finished this topic in briefly. In class lectures, we will discuss all these details with a proper analysis, and we will take all the topics of ancient, medieval, modern and the world history very critically and in a descriptive manner. Thank you.